Imagine a young, vibrant 17-year-old girl full of life and dreams, suddenly thrust into a nightmare that lasted 40 days. This is the story of Junko Furuta, who will explore the unimaginable horrors she endured, the sinister minds behind her torture and murder, and the twisted motives that led to this unspeakable crime. Stay tuned as we uncover the chilling details of her tragic fate, the aftermath, and the impact her story has had on society. Trust me, you won't want to miss a single moment of this gripping and heartbreaking tale. Welcome to the True Crime Never Sleeps podcast. I am your host, Larry Leese, and on today's episode, we're diving into the murder of Junko Furuta. And before we dive into the story, I just want to apologize for butchering any of these names. And with that, don't forget to give us a thumbs up if you like our video, hit that subscribe button down below, hit the bell notification button to be notified of future videos. And with that, let's dive right in. So who is Junko Furuta? She was a bright and promising 17-year-old high school student living in Misato, Sayatama Prefecture, Japan. Her life was characterized by a blend of academic dedication, personal interests, and close family ties that painted a picture of a typical yet remarkable young woman. She was well regarded for her academic excellence. She consistently achieved high grades and was known for her strong work ethic and dedication to her studies. Her commitment to her education was evident in her disciplined approach to schoolwork, often spending hours on homework and preparing meticulously for exams. Her teachers admired her diligence, and her peers often sought her help with their studies, reflecting her helpful and kind nature. Beyond academics, she had a wide range of interests that showcased her vibrant personality. She was particularly passionate about sports, with basketball being one of her favorite activities. She was an active member of her school's basketball team, where her determination and team spirit shined brightly. Her participation in sports not only kept her physically active, but also helped her to build strong relationships and a sense of camaraderie with her teammates. Junko's love for music was another significant aspect of her life. She enjoyed listening to a variety of music genres, often spending her free time singing along to her favorite songs. This passion for music provided her with a creative outlet and a way to relax and unwind from the pressures of school. At home, she was part of a close-knit family that provided her with a strong support system. She had a loving relationship with her parents and siblings who were always there to encourage and support her in her endeavors. Family outings and activities were a regular part of her life, fostering a deep bond among family members. She often helped with household chores and took on responsibilities that reflected her maturity and reliability. Her aspirations were as impressive as her achievements. She dreamed of pursuing a career in business with a specific interest in economics. Her goal was to attend a prestigious university, which she was well on her way to achieving, given her excellent academic record. Her ambition was driven by a desire to succeed and make her family proud, reflecting her strong sense of responsibility and determination. Despite her busy schedule, she always found time to connect with her friends. She was known for her cheerful and outgoing personality, often organizing gatherings and outings with her close friends. Her ability to balance her academic responsibilities with her personal life demonstrated her exceptional time management skills and her ability to maintain strong social connections. In essence, she was a young woman full of potential with a bright future ahead of her. Her life was a harmonious blend of academic dedication, personal interests, and strong family bonds. Her story is a stark reminder of the potential that was lost and the importance of protecting and valuing every human life. As we continue to explore the events that unfolded, it's crucial to remember her not just as a victim, but as a young girl with dreams, aspirations, and a vibrant personality. So now we're going to dive into what happened to Junko Furuta. Junko Furuta's life took a dramatic and tragic turn on November 25th, 1988. Her daily routine, which included attending school, working part-time, was interrupted by a chance encounter with Hiroshi Miyano, who had a notorious reputation for ties to the Yakuza. The encounter set the stage for a series of events that would lead to her prolonged suffering and eventual death. On that fateful day, as Junko was walking home from her part-time job, Miyano approached her. He had been aimlessly wandering the streets with his friend Nobuharu Minato, looking for someone to victimize. Miyano, pretending to be helpful, offered to walk Junko home. When she declined, he forcibly dragged her into a nearby park, threatening her with violence. This intimidation quickly escalated as Miyano contacted Minato and their other friends Yasuhushi Watanabe and Joe Agura to join them. Junko was initially lured by Miyano's seemingly friendly offer of assistance, but this quickly turned into a display of force and threats. Overpowered and outnumbered, she had no choice but to comply with their demands. The gang took her to Minato's house, where her captivity began. It was here that Junko's fate was sealed, as she was held against her will and subjected to unimaginable horrors. During her more than 40 days in captivity, Junko was subjected to a wide range of tortures that were both physically and psychologically devastating. The abuse was methodical and relentless, intended to break her spirit and cause maximum pain. The perpetrators used various methods of torture, including physical beatings, burns and scalding, sexual assault, deprivation of basic needs, infections, and untreated injuries. The conditions of Junko's captivity was deplorable. She was confined to a small, dirty room, often bound and gagged to prevent her from escaping or calling for help. The room lacked proper ventilation and sanitation, contributing to her physical decline. The constant presence of her captors, who used the space to further torment her, added to the psychological trauma. Despite the overwhelming fear and physical pain, Junko made several brave attempts to escape. On one occasion, she managed to reach a phone and dial for help, but she was caught before she could complete the call. Each attempt at escape resulted in increased brutality from her captors, who used these incidents to justify further torture. The neighbors reportedly heard her scream and cries for help, but chose not to intervene either out of fear of the gang or a belief that it was a domestic issue. This lack of intervention left Junko completely isolated, compounding her sense of helplessness and despair. Junko's ordeal was not just a series of isolated incidents of violence, but a continuous escalating campaign of terror. Her captor's ability to inflict such prolonged suffering without detection underscores the severity of the social and legal failures that allowed the tragedy to unfold. Understanding the full extent of what happened to Junko Furuta is crucial for appreciating the depth of her suffering and the gravity of the crime committed against her. Her story is a poignant reminder of the need for vigilance, compassion, and justice in protecting the vulnerable. So now we're going to take a look even deeper into those responsible for Junko Furuta's murder. The perpetrators responsible for Junko Furuta's murder were 4 young men whose backgrounds, psychological profiles, and social environments contributed to their capacity for extreme violence and cruelty. Once again, I'd like to apologize for butchering these names. These individuals were Hiroshi Miyano, Nobuhara Minato, Yasushi Watanabe, and Joe Agura. Their actions were influenced by a complex interplay of personal pathology, gang culture, and a lack of societal intervention. Hiroshi Miyano, later known as Hiroshi Yokoyama, he came from a troubled background, with his family having tenuous ties to the Yakuza, which may have influenced his early exposure to criminal activities. His home environment was reportedly unstable, contributing to his delinquent behavior from a young age. His criminal activities included theft, assault, and participation in gang-related violence. His early exposure to the Yakuza's culture of violence and intimidation played a significant role in shaping his sociopathic tendencies. He viewed violence as a means to gain respect and assert power. And then we have Nobuharu Minato, sometimes referred to as Shinji Minato. His family situation was complicated. He lived with his parents and brother, who was aware of Junko's captivity but chose to ignore it, likely out of fear or denial. This environment may have contributed to his sense of impunity and detachment from moral consequences. His role as the facilitator was crucial. His home became the site of Junko's prolonged torture, and he actively participated in the abuse. His involvement was driven by a combination of peer pressure, a desire to gain favor with Miyano, and a personal inclination towards violence. And then we have Yasushi Watanabe. He came from a background marked by delinquency and minor criminal offenses. His participation in gang activities provided him with a sense of belonging and purpose, albeit through destructive means. He was an active participant in Junko's torture, motivated by a desire to assert his dominance and fit in with his peers. He took part in the physical and sexual abuse, contributing to the escalation of violence. His behavior reflects the need for acceptance and recognition within the gang. His violent actions were likely driven by a combination of peer influence and a lack of empathy, and a desire to prove his toughness. And then we have Joe Agura, later known as Joe Kamasaku. He had a reputation for being particularly cruel and had a history of violent behavior. His association with the gang reinforced his aggressive tendencies and provided a platform for his sadistic impulses. His involvement in Junko's torture was marked by an eagerness to demonstrate his capacity for brutality. He often escalated the violence, showing no remorse for his actions. His participation included both physical and sexual abuse, further intensifying Junko's suffering. The perpetrators did not have a pre-existing personal relationship with Junko Furuta. Hiroshi Minato noticed Junko around town and developed an obsession with her. The encounter that led to her abduction was largely opportunistic. Miyano, driven by his infatuation and a desire to assert control, targeted her when he and Minato were looking for trouble. This random targeting underscores the vulnerability of Junko and the opportunistic nature of the crime. Now we're going to take a look at the aftermath. Junko Furuta's body was discovered on January 23, 1989, nearly a month after her death. The discovery was made when Joe Agura, one of the perpetrators, confessed to the crime during police questioning for an unrelated incident. This confession led to the police to the location where her body was hidden. The body of Junko Furuta was found in a drum filled with concrete. The perpetrators had encased her body in the drum and abandoned it in a cement truck lot in Koto, Tokyo. This method of disposal was intended to prevent the discovery of her remains and conceal their crime. When the police cracked open the concrete-filled drum, they found her body in a state that revealed the extent of the brutal torture she had endured. The initial reactions from the public and authorities were a mix of shock, outrage, and profound sadness. The sheer brutality of the crime and the prolonged suffering Junko endured horrified the nation. News of the discovery spread rapidly, leading to widespread media coverage. The public was outraged by the details of the crime, and there was a significant outcry for justice. Authorities faced immense pressure to ensure that the perpetrators were brought to justice, and that such a heinous crime could not occur again. Following the discovery of Junko Furuta's body, the police quickly arrested Hiroshi Miyano, Nobuharu Minato, Yasushi Watanabe, and Joe Agura. The arrests were facilitated by the confessions and evidence found at the crime scene. The perpetrators were charged with a range of offenses, including kidnapping, rape, and murder. The severity of the charges reflected the horrific nature of their actions. The trial of the four perpetrators was highly publicized and closely followed by the media and the public. During the trial, the details of Junko's ordeal were revealed, painting a gruesome picture of the abuse she suffered. The trial proceedings brought to light the extent of the perpetrators' cruelty and the failure of those around them to intervene. Hiroshi Miyano was initially sentenced to 20 years in prison and was later reduced to 17 years on appeal. The reduction in his sentence sparked significant public outrage, as many felt it did not reflect the severity of his crimes. Minato was sentenced to 5 to 9 years in prison. The leniency of his sentence was also met with public disapproval, as it was seen as inadequate for his role in the crime. Yasushi Watanabe was sentenced to 5 to 7 years in prison, and like the previous ones, his sentence was considered too lenient by many, given the brutality of his actions. And Joe Agura was sentenced to 8 years in a juvenile detention center. Despite his confession, the relatively short sentence was viewed as insufficient punishment for his involvement in the crime. The sentences given to the perpetrators were criticized, like we mentioned, for being too lenient. Over the years, all 4 perpetrators have been released from prison, and their current statuses are what we're discussing now. Hiroshi was released from prison in 2009 and continues to have run-ins with the law, including arrests for fraud and other criminal activities. And then we have Minato. He was released from prison after serving his sentence and has maintained a low profile. And there are limited public records of his activities since his release, but his involvement in such a high-profile crime means he will always be remembered for his role in Junko's torture and murder. And then we have Watanabe. After his release, he also maintained a low profile. The lack of public information about his life post-release reflects the effort of those convicted to avoid further public scrutiny. And then Joe Agura. He was released from juvenile detention, reportedly changed his name to Joe Kamasaku, and despite attempts to start anew, his past continues to follow him. And there have been reports of subsequent legal issues and violent behavior. The public reaction to the sentences was overwhelmingly negative. Many felt that the justice system had failed Junko and her family by not imposing harsher penalties. The perceived leniency of the sentences led to calls for legal reforms and a re-evaluation of how violent crimes, particularly those committed by juveniles, are prosecuted and sentenced. Her case had a profound impact on Japan's legal system. It highlighted the need for more stringent sentencing laws for violent crimes and spurred discussions about the treatment of juvenile offenders. The case prompted a re-evaluation of the protections afforded to victims and led to increased awareness and prevention efforts to ensure that such a tragedy would not be repeated. Now we're going to take a look at some of the reaction to the case from the public and the media. The public and media's reaction to the case was intense and multifaceted, reflecting the profound impact it had on Japanese society and beyond. The sheer brutality and duration of Junko's suffering struck a deep chord, leading to widespread outrage, and sorrow. The case received extensive national and international coverage, becoming one of the most infamous criminal cases in Japan's history. Major Japanese newspapers and television networks provided detailed accounts of the crime, trial, and the later public reaction. The international media also picked up the story, highlighting the severity of the crime and the perceived inadequacies in the justice system's response. Japanese media extensively covered the case, with newspapers dedicating front-page stories to the Junko's ordeal, and television networks started airing special reports and documentaries. Along with those documentaries, we had several books that were produced exploring the case in detail. These works have helped to keep Junko's story alive, ensuring that her tragic fate is not forgotten. And the case attracted significant international attention, with media outlets in countries like the US, the UK, and Australia working on the crime. The international coverage highlighted global concerns about violence against women and the need for stronger legal protections. The public outcry and media attention surrounding Junko's case prompted significant changes in Japanese laws and policies. The case highlighted several deficiencies in the legal system, particularly in the handling of juvenile offenders and the protection of victims in violent crimes. One of the major outcomes was the push for stricter sentencing laws for violent crimes, especially those involving juveniles. The case led to a re-evaluation of the penalties for such crimes and the introduction of harsher sentences for those found guilty of severe acts of violence. The case spurred discussions about the juvenile justice system and led to reforms aimed at ensuring that juveniles who commit serious crimes are held accountable. Changes included revising the age of criminal responsibility and implementing measures to ensure that juveniles receive appropriate punishment for their actions. The case also highlighted the need for better protection and support for victims of violent crimes. This led to the introduction of new laws and policies aimed at providing victims with greater protection, including restraining orders, improved victim support services, and increased funding for shelters and counseling. The brutal nature of Junko's case and the public's response inspired a series of legal reforms aimed at preventing similar tragedies in the future. These reforms were designed to address the gaps in the legal system and ensure the perpetrators of violent crimes faced appropriate consequences. This include a revised penal code, enhanced investigative procedures, and increased judicial discretion. The long-term impact of Junko Furuta's case on Japanese society and the legal system cannot be overstated. It served as a catalyst for significant changes and continues to be a poignant reminder of the need for vigilance, justice, and compassion in protecting the vulnerable. It's crucial to remember Junko Furuta not just as a victim of a horrific crime, but as a young girl with dreams and aspirations whose life was stolen in the most brutal way imaginable. Her story is a stark reminder of the depths of human cruelty and the importance of justice and protection for all. By remembering Junko, we honor her memory and reinforce our collective resolve to prevent such atrocities from happening again. As we conclude this episode, we encourage you to stay informed and engaged with issues related to crime and justice. Educate yourself about the signs of abuse and the importance of intervention. Support organizations and initiatives dedicated to protecting the vulnerable and advocating for victims' rights. Share Junko's story to raise awareness and keep her memory alive. Together, we can create a safer and more just society. Thank you for watching. Let us know your thoughts on this case in the comments section below. And give us your thoughts. Do you think the sentences were too lenient? Or were they fair? Let me know. And of course, if you want to support the channel, you can buy us a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/TCNS. As always, thank you so much for watching and listening. We'll see you next time.